through the folks that are on?
Yep, so here in person, we have Secretary DeMatteis, and logging in virtually, I have Sean O'Brien, Karen Field-Rogers, Treasurer Davis, Commissioner Navarro, and Tom Bracken. For anybody I might be missing that might have recently just logged on.
Okay.
Oh, I see the Secretary
Secretary
Davis.
Manning.
Yep, Secretary Manning's on.
Secretary Manning, thanks for joining us. Anybody else? All right, we'll go ahead and get started. Before we move to approval of the April 22nd minutes, I want to wish Faith a happy early birthday. Her birthday is tomorrow. And but for this meeting, she could have had a long weekend, but instead we brought her back to this meeting. So happy birthday, Faith.
Thank you.
Thanks for all that you do. And we circulated the April 22nd SCBC meeting minutes in advance. Are there any changes?
Secretary DeMatteis, we did have an edit from Sean O'Brien, just a very small grammatical edit that we did incorporate this morning.
Okay, so that's the version I have in front of me.
That I did not print an updated one. It's found the last instance in the SABC dashboard section.
Okay.
We changed contributed to attributed.
Oh, I see. Okay. Very good. With that change, I will entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
There's a second?
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions?
Abstain due to absence.
Gisette was not here last time, so she's going to abstain. Thank you, Gisette. All right, we moved public comment to the start of the meeting. It's become a best practice in some of the state meetings, certainly that I attend. We've done it here at least once where we had it at the beginning of the meeting, so we'll try it and see how it goes, see if it's effective. We also have to go into executive session, and I didn't want public comment to get lost as we leave and go into executive session and then come back. Is there anybody that has signed up for public comment?
We don't have anyone that was pre-registered for public comment. We did get one written comment that I did distribute to the committee on Friday. Is there anybody logged in virtually that would like to make a public comment? You can raise your hand.
What? Bob Clarkin.
Right. Hold up. Clarkin, I just, just authorize your microphone.
Bob, can you talk? Sounds like you're still on mute. Are you able to unmute, Bob?
Try this. Can you unmute now? Nope. I'm going to jump down to Linda Hastings.
We'll come back to Mr. Clarkin.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, I want to comment on item 7 in your agenda, and that's the quarterly reports. I didn't get this till last night, and so I did try to get through all 202 pages, but I may have missed some stuff. I want to start with page 27, fiscal year 24 Q3 reporting reconciliation.
Through the folks that are on.
Yep, so here in person, we have Secretary DeMatteis, and logging in virtually, I have Sean O'Brien, Karen Field-Rogers, Treasurer Davis, Commissioner Navarro, and Tom Bracken. For anybody I might be missing that might have recently just logged on.
Okay.
Oh, I see the Secretary Davis.
Manning.
Yep, Secretary Manning's on.
Secretary Manning, thanks for joining us. Anybody else? All right, we'll go ahead and get started. Before we move to approval of the April 22nd minutes, I want to wish Faith a happy early birthday. Her birthday is tomorrow. And but for this meeting, she could have had a long weekend, but instead we brought her back to this meeting. So happy birthday, Faith.
Thank you.
Thanks for all that you do. And we circulated the April 22nd SCBC meeting minutes in advance. Are there any changes?
Secretary DeMatteis, we did have an edit from Sean O'Brien, just a very small grammatical edit that we did incorporate this morning.
Okay, so that's the version I have in front of me.
That, I did not print an updated one. It's the last instance in the SABC dashboard section.
Okay.
We changed contributed to attributed.
Oh, I see. Okay. Very good. With that change, I will entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
There's a second?
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions?
Abstain due to absence.
Gisette was not here last time, so she's going to abstain. Thank you, Gisette. All right, we moved public comment to the start of the meeting. It's become a best practice in some of the state meetings, certainly that I attend. We've done it here at least once where we had it at the beginning of the meeting, so we'll try it and see how it goes, see if it's effective. We also have to go into executive session, and I didn't want public comment to get lost as we leave and go into executive session and then come back. Is there anybody that has signed up for public comment?
We don't have anyone that was pre-registered for public comment. We did get one written comment that I did distribute to the committee on Friday. Is there anybody logged in virtually that would like to make a public comment? You can raise your hand.
What? Bob Clarkin.
Right. Hold up. Clarkin, I just, yep, just authorize your microphone.
Bob, can you talk? Sounds like you said you're still on mute. Are you able to unmute, Bob?
Try this. Can you unmute now? Nope. I'm going to jump down to Linda Hastings.
We'll come back to Mr. Clarkin.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, I want to comment on item 7 in your agenda, and that's the quarterly reports. I didn't get this till last night, and so I did try to get through all 202 pages, but I may have missed some stuff. I want to start with page 27, fiscal year 24 Q3 reporting reconciliation. And I see in that page that in footnote 2 of that page, WTW reflects that egg whip revenue and prescription rebates they use them as offsets to prescription claims, and DHR reflects them as additions to operating revenues. So I guess that means you all take it as income of sorts. I want to talk about the implications of that. I know we've known this before, but it really hit me last night. If you look at pages 20 to 24 in the long handout that I saw, that's fiscal year 24 Q3 planned cost analysis. Page 20 shows total GHIP results, and the RX costs represent the costs after offsets are applied. It appears that those offsets are then proportionally applied across all groups in pages 21 through 24. I may have gotten this wrong, but I think that the prescription offsets come to the state because of the Medicare population. If I'm wrong, I would be happy to be corrected later by somebody from WTW. In any event, my concern is that when you do it this way, I think it changes the per person, per month, and per year costs. And it disproportionately shows seniors costing more than we actually do if we're the source of that income. And I especially am concerned about that because on page 91 of this group of pages you've sent out, the GHIP strategic framework, the FY23 goal dashboard, you talk about moving on to category 4 as one of your goals. And in that you're talking about giving out healthcare based on per person per month, cost per month. And we're being skewed inappropriately as retirees, I believe. I'm Linda Hastings. Thanks.
Thank you. And Bob, have you been able to get your microphone working?
Can you hear me now?
I can, yes.
Good. Great, thank you. I sent in some written comments and I'd like to just talk about one of them if I could. You can tell by the agenda for today's meeting and all of the great handouts that this is a really, really important meeting. And there are so many active employees who are at work right now who can't watch this meeting. There are lots of retirees who have other commitments who can't watch this meeting. There's legislators who are busy legislating and thinking about legislating, and they can't watch this meeting. There are some members of the committee and their staff who are busy and they can't watch the meeting. Now, if I miss the meeting, I can't see unless I'm a member of the committee, I can't see the minutes for this meeting until after they're approved at the next meeting, which is a 30-day delay before I know the details of what went on during this meeting, especially the fiscal information, which when the WTW staff go over the fiscal information or any of the other handouts that the materials they prepared, they really put detail behind those reports and detail behind the information that even if you're taking notes, it's hard to write it all down. And there's no way possible that the meeting minutes could contain all of the discussions and all the information that's shared during the meetings. Now, it was very, very, very helpful and very important that during the meetings of the advisory committee, those meetings were recorded and the recordings were made public. So if I missed a meeting, I could watch it at my leisure. If I'm an active employee and I'm working, I could watch it at my leisure. And if there was something there really important that I just couldn't get the gist of, or I couldn't write it down fast enough, I could refresh my memory and I could go back and watch the meeting. So because the advisory committee was a subcommittee of this committee, and the state and DHR and SBO was able to put those videos on their website and make them available to the public, I think it would be a great thing for you to do if you would think about posting the videos for your meetings as you did for the advisory committee. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else that would like to make a public comment? You could raise your hand.
I'm not seeing anybody else. Are there any additional SEBC members that have joined us, Carol?
Director Kate joined us.
Oh, great. Hey, Director Kate. All right. With that, we will move into executive session. I'd like to entertain a motion, please, for us to move into executive session. And then after we come back out of executive session, we'll proceed with the rest of the agenda. As you see, there is one additional vote that we will have to take after we come back out of executive session. So a motion to move into executive session, please.
Motion to move into executive session. This is Josette.
Thank you, Secretary Manning. Is there a second?
Second, Karen
Second.
Phil Rogers.
Karen, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, we'll, they have to log out of this.
Yep, and everyone should have received a separate meeting invite for the executive.
All right, we're just getting a quorum, everybody. Thanks for hanging with us. Do our best to get through this in half hour. We're working on a quorum.
Looking for people still.
And we'll do our best to get through this in 30 minutes. I think we are gonna run a little bit long. The Willis Towers team, obviously it's very, very important information to share on the financials, but I think we can condense it and really hit the highlights. But we don't have a quorum yet. I need to start texting.
Quorum.
Okay. All right, we have a quorum. Can you guys know who's on?
Yep, so I have Director Cade, I have Sean O'Brien, Karen Field Rogers, Commissioner Navarro, and Tom Bracken. I haven't seen Secretary Manning yet, or Treasurer Davis, or the Lieutenant Governor.
But we have a quorum, so we'll go ahead and get started. Faith, with your updates?
Yes, so I have just a couple of updates. I just want to report out specific to 2024 open enrollment, which closed on May 17th. We did see overall an increase in participation at 84.2% compared to 81.5% in 2023. So thank you to all committee members and for your continued outreach and communications to your employees and staff on that. We will report out in July on detailed plan enrollment changes for fiscal year 25 compared to 24, so at the July meeting. I want to share with the committee an update with regards to State of Delaware Group Health Insurance Plan members receiving GLP-1 medications through the Caremark mail service pharmacy. We were notified that as of May 15th, CVS mail service pharmacy would no longer be able to dispense Mounjaro, Trulicity, Wegovy, and Saxenda due to the shortages. Members were proactively notified and advised on various options to receive those medications through the retail pharmacy network. But this is, again, tied to what I'm sure most of us are seeing in the news about just issues with the demand outpacing the supply of these medications. So there were about 600 State of Delaware members who were receiving those medications through the mail service pharmacy. I want to make members aware of a potential network termination from the Highmark Delaware Comp PPO and First State Basic Plan networks effective July 1st, 2024. We've been notified that U.S. Digestive Health has or is in current contract negotiations with Highmark. As of today, no agreement has been reached. If there is no agreement reached, this will impact just under 2,000 group health insurance plan Highmark members who are actively seen by providers with U.S. Digestive Health. We are in discussions with internally and with Department of Justice when possibly offering a one-time limited enrollment change opportunity just to those individuals should this contract negotiation fail. They would be offered the opportunity to move to an Aetna plan. That would, however, be caveated with if they make that move to Aetna and the provider comes back into the Highmark network during the plan year, individuals would not be able to move back to Highmark. But again, we're working through those details. We will update the committee further when we meet in June. Highmark will be dropping letters in the mail to those affected members on June 1st.
They'll come to agreement.
Yes. Just very quickly, the Financial and Health Policy subcommittees met last Monday. We are reviewing today most of the items that were discussed. We will be holding a combined meeting of both of those groups for the June 17th meeting. We've got a couple of topics that will be on that agenda that we felt were appropriate for both groups. So we'll be consolidating that. That meeting will be June 17th from 10 a.m. to noon.
Okay.
And then just lastly, I will be providing updates on all of the bills that we are tracking that are moving through the legislature and impacting either the SBC or the group health insurance plan. That will go out later today to committee members, but I just want to call your attention to several bills impacting the SEBC specifically, the first being House Amendment 3 to House Bill 281. And the second being House Amendment 1 and House Amendment 2 to House Bill 282. These were the two bills introduced much earlier this calendar year as a result of some of the retiree subcommittee work. Both of those bills have now passed both the House and the Senate, and they are awaiting action by the governor. So that happened just late last week, last Thursday. We've also had three other bills associated with recommendations from the Retiree Healthcare Benefits Advisory Subcommittee that were introduced. Those are House Bills 375, 376, and 377. They've all been introduced and assigned to House administration. But again, I will share those details with committee members separately in the interest of time. Lastly, I just want to call out Senate Bill 10, which is a prior authorization reform bill introduced by, sponsored by Senator Townsend and introduced in June of 2023. That bill was heard before Senate Banking, Business and Insurance and Technology Committee on the 15th of May. It has not been released from committee, but we are expecting that bill to move forward or potentially with an amendment or substitute when the legislature reconvenes after a budget markup.
So the Joint Finance Committee's meeting is a 2-week break. The General Assembly comes back in session for 3 weeks in June. To wrap up June 30th, there is a state holiday in there, Juneteenth, but other than that, they'll be in session Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday.
So again, the long list of bills we're tracking, I will send out to the committee.
Right.
Any questions with that before I roll into RFP updates? Seeing no hands raised, I will take the next agenda item on updates to the 2024 request for proposals. Included in your packets, and Carol has displayed on the Teams platform, is a revised timeline for 3 RFPs that we've previously discussed. The first being Flexible Spending Account, Pre-Tax Commuter, and COBRA. The second being the Employee Assistance Program, and the third being the Group Accidental and Critical Illness Supplemental Insurance Benefits. These 3 RFPs were originally targeted for a advertisement in the month of May. We have delayed the advertisement to July for these 3 RFPs to allow additional time for some changes in the template request for proposal document that we use for our RFPs. We're working with our Deputy Attorney General on some revisions to that. So we will be notifying your respective proposal review committee members of the changes outlined in the timeline, specifically those meetings that they'll be participating in with regards to the RFP responses and the vendor interviews. We are still targeting contract effective dates on all 3 for 7/1/25. And we will be bringing the award recommendation or contract negotiation recommendation to the SCBC for these three before the end of the calendar year. As we've also discussed, we'll be continuing discussions with this committee and subcommittees on the group universal life or life insurance request for proposal that's targeted for advertisement first quarter of 2025. And we will begin discussions over the next 2 months with the subcommittees on the development of an audit request for proposal for auditing the medical and prescription programs. That contract currently is set to expire on June 30th of 2025. We are still targeting the October timeframe to advertise that request for proposal, but similar to life insurance, we are going to be asking for input from the subcommittees on the scope for that RFP, recognizing there's been some advancements in the field of healthcare plan, self-administered plan auditing that we want to discuss and consider modifying that scope from past RFPs. So more to come on that as well in the coming months. Any questions, clarifications before we move forward?
Okay. Move on to a discussion of financials. And as you saw from the updated numbers, it looks like that we're still in the black. We probably won't hit deficit now until next month. And as I understand it, the projection is we will end the fiscal year at a deficit, that GHIP will end the fiscal year at a deficit of 8 million. The Change Health cyber attack and the processing of claims is picking back up. We'll go through that. We're seeing Highmark and Aetna getting us these claims in a quicker fashion than we have, at least for the past several months. So it's a little bit more current as to us seeing these claims and that they've been processed. Brian, are you going to walk us through the April 2024 fund report?
I am, Secretary DeMatteis. Thank you. And in light of the time, sort of looking at the 5 financial topics that we're going to cover, I think we can skip the quarterly financial reporting, predominantly because that reporting is in different buckets than the fund report, as well as there's actually differences in the data that's there. And we predominantly use that report to look at results by sub-cohort, meaning actives, early retirees, and Medicare retirees. But you'll see from the fund presentation, we actually now have the capability of tracking those results at the fund level. So that data is now a little bit obsolete since we can now track it at the fund level. And on the SCBC dashboard, we can probably skip that too, mostly because that data is through April and the year-over-year numbers are now pretty skewed because of the Change Health cyber attack, at least through April. So it's not necessarily meaningful data. So I'll touch in on the big highlights, obviously answer any questions that committee members have. And if there's specific material that I didn't get to, certainly chime in and I can cover that as well. I'm going to share my screen real quick. So getting right to the highlights, to Secretary DeMatteis's point, this data is a little bit different than the data that we presented last week to the financial subcommittee, which was exclusively based on data through April. We've actually now updated the full year forecast based on invoices through this morning. So we actually have all invoices that would impact the fund in May, both from Aetna and Highmark. Last week's invoice from Highmark was exceptionally large, even significantly larger than what we were seeing from a run rate. As the Change Healthcare backlog started to clear out, we were seeing roughly, call it $14, $15, $16 million a week. Last week's invoice was north of $22 million. We subsequently learned from Highmark that it was a big clear out of the backlog, specifically from Christiana Healthcare. And then this morning's invoice went back to about the $15 million range, which is what we were expecting. So assuming that the final invoices for FY24, meaning the last 4 in June, come in again around that $15-16 million range, which is what we would expect, then we're estimating that the full backlog from the cyber attack will be cleared out by the end of FY24.
So,
Having said that, to Secretary DeMatteis's point again, that would leave the fund with a cash deficit of about $8 million by the end of June. Specific to April, since we haven't yet covered April results for the SEBC, looking at the top of the chart, premium contributions came in about $3 million better than budget, predominantly due to a double payment from the Delaware Transit Corp, which was a makeup from April. Claims ran significantly better than budget in April, again, due to the slowdown from the Change Healthcare cyber attack. When we look at May specifically, that basically mostly got wiped out, and we expect to see a continued higher amount in June compared to budget, where we now forecast claims. You can see at the bottom of the exhibit, claims to be about $18 million worse than budget for the full year, with premium contributions and other revenues coming in somewhat better than budget, offsetting that for a full year deficit of about $10.8 million, which, when coupled with the expectation that we would wind up, originally forecast the year to wind up with a $2.8 million surplus, that gets us to that $8 million cash shortfall for the year. Those are relatively the big highlights relative to the fund, other than the one component that I just talked about, where we now have the ability to track results for the 3 major cohorts separately, active, separate from pre-65 retirees, separate from Medicare retirees, with one small caveat that you can see there is no surgery plus Hinge Health columns. There are no columns in the pre-65. We don't yet have the data from Surgery Plus to do that. That's a nominal amount, maybe $1 million or $2 million, that will shift out of the active buckets into the pre-65 buckets, but again, not having a major impact on the overall results. So having said that, I'm sorry, this is claims. I want the other one. I want this one. So when looking at the group separately, meaning revenues coming in the form of premium contributions and other revenues, either EGWP revenues or rebates, measured against dollars going out, claims and expenses, the active population is running at about 107% loss ratio, or would run, projected to run a deficit of about $58 million for the full year. Similar results on the pre-65 retirees, 109% loss ratio and about an $11 million deficit. And the Medicare population forecasted to run just about on budget, or a nominal $3.1 million surplus. So again, those are the highlights from a fund standpoint, a financial standpoint. Let me pause real quickly there to see if there are either any questions on what I covered, or if there was anything specific that any committee member wants me to cover that I didn't specifically review.
any questions? Okay, keep going, Brian.
All right, moving on to the trend topic. Again, I'll cover the highlights. There are slides in here that specifically talk about external macroeconomic factors that affect the expectations of trend, but I'll talk about the components that are more specific to the GHIP. Recall we had this discussion last August, where at that time we were recommending increases to the underlying trend assumptions used to project costs, where we had a prior trend assumption of 5% on the non-Medicare medical side, 8% on the prescription drug side, both Medicare and non-Medicare, and then 3% on the Medicare Medic-Fill side, where we recommended increases in the medical trend from 5% to 6%, and the prescription drug trend from 8% to 9%, which are the assumptions that were approved by the SCBC at that time and are used currently in our budgeting and forecasting exercise. This chart was also given at that same point in time last year. Obviously, we didn't have FY24 data, so this is supplementing that historical GHIP trend experience with FY24 year to date, noting that the FY24 year to date numbers here are based on data through February, again, because of the fact that we had the Change Healthcare cyber attack that significantly impacted both March and April claims. We didn't want to artificially distort the trend experience down. And as you can see, as we look at each of the groups separately, over the full period shown here from an active and early retiree medical standpoint, all of these years have averaged out to 4%, but the prior 4 years have averaged out to something higher than 4% at 8%. The FY24 average through February came in at 5%, and I just quickly looked at, since we did revert back to much higher claims experience in May, as well as the projections through the end of the year, expecting to clear that out. And as of now, the full fiscal year trend in the same bucket is projected at 5.4%. So roughly the same number. Looking at the prescription drug side of the equation, again, separate from the EGWP, again, a sort of a similar pattern in terms of seeing the overall database average for all of these 8 years at about 8% on average, and a little bit higher again in the last 4 at 9%, with particular emphasis on the last 2 years, seeing a 15% trend and a 13% trend through February. I will point out that that 13% trend excludes the Prudent RX savings, which artificially lowers the actual trend because Prudent RX didn't go into effect until FY24. Therefore, it wasn't in effect in FY23, and we're obviously measuring year over year increases. From a Medic-Fill standpoint, we've started to see a pattern of upticks in trend in more recent years, again, 4% over the whole period. That average was certainly brought up by this 13% that we've been seeing in FY24 year to date, and the average of the last 4 years for the EGWP factoring in, again, they're including in this 13%, brings that average trend all the way up to 7%. And then on the EGWP side, a similar pattern to the non-EGWP pharmacy trends, just a little bit lower over the average periods, but again, seeing higher than 10% trends both in the last 2 periods for the EGWP. Now, having said all that, we have relative guidance in terms of recommendations for trends going forward, varying recommendations of trends depending upon whether the plan covers GLP-1 drugs for weight loss versus do not cover GLP-1 drugs for weight loss. Obviously, the GHIP plan does today. You can see a fairly significant gap in the recommended ranges of trend between plans that do cover and plans that don't cover, a 3% spread from high to low. Those are the highlights from a GHIP standpoint. Slides 3 through 6 are sort of 3 through 7 are macroeconomic factors affecting trend assumptions. But based on the GHIP historical experience, the fact that the plan does cover GLP-1 drugs for weight loss, based on the fact that we know even on the diabetic side, GLP-1 utilization and costs have gone up significantly. We're recommending that the active and non-Medicare medical trend remain at 6%, reasonably in line with what we've been seeing over the past 8 years. We're recommending that the trend for the Medicare Medicaid population get increased from 3% to 5%. Again, going back to the specific experience we've been seeing in the 4 to 7% range, depending upon what periods you use, as well as relatively seeing that in the past 4 years, with FY24 being appearing to be an anomalously extra high period. And then on the prescription drug side, we're recommending an increase from the 9% trend assumption up to 10% for both populations, both the commercial pharmacy population and the EGWP. Again, mostly due to what we've been seeing over the last couple of years, coupled with the fact that the plan covers the GLP-1 drugs for weight loss and obviously for diabetes care. Just to give you a feel for the impact on forecasted costs of these recommended trend assumptions, they would raise our forecasted FY25 expected claims by about $6 million. And then due to the compounding effect, we expect that delta would grow to a little more than $30 million over the next 4 years. Don't really have next steps. It's not something we're looking for a vote on today. The financial subcommittee had asked us to wait and see how the balance of FY24 came in and how the Change Healthcare backlog, did it work itself out, and what we really saw in terms of trend. Now that we've gotten that extra experience through all of May, at least on the medical side, it does seem like FY24 is coming in line with what we had presented based on the data through February. So let me pause there and answer any questions from the committee.
Just really drives home that these costs just keep going up. Any comments, questions? It's good to get a read on this now, Brian.
Commissioner Navarro?
Hi, Commissioner.
Hi, Brian. Thank you. So given the future increases that you're projecting to 6 million over 2025 and growing to 30 million by 28, what do you think? And that's what your jobs do, is predict. But what do you think it's going to mean for premiums for GHIP?
A good question. So as of now, so while we were in executive session, I looked at this. This row that I just highlighted, labeled baseline, is what the claims were currently projected to be utilizing the current trend assumptions, the non-increased trend assumptions. The underlying actual model, now the exhibit at the top, has those updated trend assumptions flowing through. You can see that $6 million impact here in FY25. So if we want to, again, ultimately get ourselves to a place where we have a $0 deficit or surplus after reserves by FY28, that means that we would need this number to be 0. This number. Now, that certainly could be smooth, but as of now, because of the fact that the rate action that we put through for FY24 that was already approved, right, the 27%, that was helping us catch up from the prior period deficit, and then ultimately compounds into an added benefit, or FY25. You can see that it's forecasting a 0% increase today needed for FY25, because we'll still have a surplus, and then those amounts start to wear away. If we put in, I'll make something up, right? Let's just look at a couple of scenarios. We could do a 5% in FY '27 to smooth out. We've always sort of historically talked about smoothing techniques of spreading rate actions over the course of a couple of years. That would mean ultimately 0, 5, and 5, utilizing the higher trend assumptions. The other thing, sorry, real quick, sorry, Secretary. The other thing to point out in this modeling, which is what we've also been doing, is we've had a reserve that started out at a cash reserve estimate that, because of the exorbitant rate action needed for FY '25, was only getting us to a 2% margin in that minimum reserve, whereas for FY '26 and forward, we're growing that to 4%. So we're adding in an extra variability cushion to protect ourselves against worse than expected experience, to avoid us ending up in a cash deficit again. But relatively modest rate actions, all other things being equal, meaning claims coming in as expected with the higher trend assumption model.
Thank you, Brian.
Sure. Any other questions?
Want to
So
go to the
hearing-
GHI trend assumptions?
I'm sorry, Secretary, say that again?
Want to go to the trend? Anything else on the trend assumptions?
Nothing else on the trend.
Okay. All right, we'll move on to the Surgery Plus savings analysis.
Thank you, Secretary.
Hi, Jake.
We,
You just need to unmute your mic, right?
I just got, should be coming up.
All right,
Second.
Jake. You there,
Can you hear me
Jake?
okay?
Yes.
Okay, sorry about that. All right, can we go to the next slide, please, Jacqueline? All right, so for the analysis we did for Surgery Plus, sorry, I have noise coming out of multiple things here. We found that the program generates substantial savings before we account for the various fees and incentives that are paid for the program. Once we account for the fees and incentives, the savings are significantly eroded. However, the program accomplishes several of the committee's goals. It reduces the total cost of care. It preserves the quality of the care that's delivered and the choice and providers that patients can use. And it incentivizes utilization and shares savings with the GHIP participants, all while reducing the total cost of care. We looked at the fees that Surgery Plus is retaining. They're a fixed percentage of the bundle claim amount. They're fairly high. That's eating away a lot of the savings. And then the member incentives that are paid for people to go use the services, they're eating away the services. So those could be realigned in order to increase the net savings to the plan. In terms of the various procedures, we looked at the procedures by category. We saw that ENT, GI, and general surgery procedures appear to be driving most of the savings as a percentage of the bundled cost. Pain management and biopsy are adding costs to the plan, meaning there's no savings for those procedures and they actually end up being a cost. And then we found some categories like orthopedics and spinal surgeries that generate a savings in terms of gross cost, but once we account for the fees, they end up being a cost to the plan. So if the fee structure was changed, those might end up being a savings to the plan after the fees as well. There are a couple follow-ups that we have. There's 48 bundles that Surgery Plus indicated were complete, but W2W couldn't find a procedure code that should trigger a bundle. So we need to resolve that as a follow-up. And then for next year, the performance guarantees will be evaluated according to the contract, and it could generate a payout to the state depending on how the results come in. But this year was measurement only. The next two slides here discuss the methodology for the analysis. These materials will be posted after the meeting, so I'm not going to go through these in detail in the interest of time, but the methodology information is here for review. But overall, when we look at the results, the analysis indicated that Surgery Plus generated $4.1 million in gross savings before we take into account the program fees and incentives. The fees reduced the savings to $1.5 million. From there, the state offered $1.55 million in incentives and waived cost sharing. So incentives to use the program that are paid directly to members, and then members have their deductibles, copays, things like that forgiven in exchange for using the Surgery Plus program. So that actually brings the program to an $82,000 cost over the period that was analyzed. However, even though there was an $82,000 cost, it directly benefited the members to the tune of $1.5 million. And then there were three top condition categories: bariatrics, joint replacement, and orthopedics. Those accounted for nearly 79% of the state's spend. So in follow-up, that's where we should focus our energy on driving savings.
Thank you, Jake.
Okay. Of course,
And
thank
as a
you.
result of our executive session discussion, we are going to really look at what it would take to better align those program fees, cost incentives, cost sharings, and as a committee in public session, discuss any changes at the August and September meetings that would go into effect on January 1 of 2025. So the statewide benefits team and Willis Towers team has some work to do for us between now, May, and August, when we will revisit this again. Any further comments? Thank you for that analysis. It's important not just to put programs in place, but to take a look back and see how they're doing and whether they're accomplishing our goals. We'll move on to a discussion on the disability insurance program rules and regulations, and this does require a vote. We've now been discussing this for the past several meetings, and this is the meeting that we are scheduled to vote on this. Paige?
Thank you, Secretary. So I'm going to ask that we jump straight to slide 3. And I'll just quickly remind committee members, we did discuss this and provided you with the tracked changes version of the disability insurance program rules and regulations that would go into effect July 1st in advance of your April meeting. I mentioned that there were 2 definitions that were still in question, and we were discussing further with the Department of Justice. So what was contained in your packet and posted online is a slightly modified version of those rules and regulations from April, specifically to make the changes that I'm about to review here on the slide. One of the questions from a subcommittee member was specific to the definition of healthcare provider. There was mentioned by that subcommittee member that there was a definition of healthcare provider in Title 16, Chapter 2501J of the code. And there was questions to why or could the disability rules and regs be aligned with that definition. We discussed with our Deputy Attorney General, they agreed. So the change has been made to the rules and regulations to align again with that definition already in code. The other changes that are contained within the version that you have before you for vote and approval today are specific as well to another definition, DIP/RTW representatives, which we had a technical correction, DIP being disability insurance program, RTW being return to work representatives. We just had, again, a very small technical change in that definition to remove the word "and" from the definition. We also added a definition for RTW, that acronym meaning return to work. And then in section 23.1, we also made a technical correction to use a lowercase c for the word coordinator in ADA, Americans with Disability Act coordinator, or designee in parentheses. So those are the only changes made for the version that you've received, and that's before you for approval. I do want to call out Mr. O'Brien. You did send a couple of other technical edits prior to the meeting today. We certainly could read those into the record for approval, and we can make those changes as well before the rules are submitted to the registered regulations, but don't believe we had any concerns with those edits. Again, just technical in nature. So I will pause there for questions, clarifications, any other discussion on the rules and regs.
Okay, that is a lot of detailed work. I want to specifically thank Michelle Whalen, our Deputy Attorney General. She has been dogged in helping us review all this. Thank you, Michelle.
You're very welcome.
All right.
I can't take too much credit for this. We also had help from a colleague at the DOJ.
Always sharing the credit, Michelle. We love you. All right. The subcommittee is obviously reviewed, which is our proper procedure. We've had public comment in this meeting at the top of the meeting. So now I will entertain a motion to approve the disability insurance program rules and regulations. Sean,
Yeah, I just want to follow.
do you mind if I get a motion in a second, and then I'll open it up for questions?
Well, okay, I'm following up on Faith in the technical corrections, and the question is at what point you want to handle those.
Go ahead, Faith.
Yeah, so I think we normally would do a motion in a second and then discussion. I can read them in if you're comfortable with that, Mr. O'Brien.
Sure, if you need an amendment proposed as well, whatever works.
Let's get a motion in a second, and then as part of the discussion, we'll include the technical changes. So is there a motion to approve the disability insurance program rules and regulations?
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner. Now, let's open it up for discussion. Faith?
All right, so Mr. O'Brien, I'm referring to your email from 12/20, where you did call out in the definition of a DIP/RTW representatives on page 2 that there should be an apostrophe after organizations, so that it should be employee organizations apostrophe human resources, comma, benefits, comma, or payroll representatives. So is that consistent with the change that you're requesting there?
Yes.
And then the second change was with regards to the definition of qualified individual with a disability. This is on the top of page 5 for those tracking with the rules. The request was to strike the word has at the end of the line, which reads a person with a disability according to the ADA is defined as someone who, and that it would be colon, followed by, we would add the word has at the beginning of the next 3 bullets. The first being a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more of the major life activities of the individual. The second being a record of the impairment, semicolon, or, and the third bullet being being regarded as having the impairment. So in that line, we would strike being and add is, and then in the first 2 lines, we would add the word has. That consistent?
Yes, it is. Thank you.
Yes.
That was it.
Okay. So we have a motion on the table that has been seconded that includes the grammatical and other technical corrections requested by SEBC member Sean O'Brien. With all, now I'm going to call the question. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, the motion is approved. I'll just note, next steps then will be June 15th. The final document will be submitted to the Registrar of Regulations for review and publication, and then July 1 would be the effective date of the updated disability insurance program rules and regulations. Faith and team, thank you all very much for your work on that. I'm sure Deb Lawhead. Integral as well. Thank you, Deb Lawhead, if you're listening. All right, we have one more topic that shouldn't take us too long. We are going to move the group universal life insurance benefit renewal proposal to a later meeting since we're not under the gun timeline on that. So we have one final item to review, and that is the GHIP and statewide benefits office strategic planning for FY 2023 results.
Jack is gonna walk us through this.
Yeah, sorry about that. Yes, good afternoon again, everyone. So this is, we'll keep this very brief in the interest of time. This is a high-level summary of the goals and results of the GHIP strategic framework for the FY23 plan year ending in June of 2023. The full report surrounding the outcome of these goals has been sent to committee members and is posted on the SEBC website. That report also includes a summary of the statewide benefit office strategic plan, which outlines the actions of the statewide benefits office towards achieving the goals set forth by the SEBC. Please note that these goals do not include the updates to the strategic framework that were made and approved by the committee in December. Those updates are applicable to the FY24 version of these goals, which will be reported out on early next year. So turning our attention to the slide on the screen, for the first goal, this is really around increasing the proportion of GHIP medical spend to providers who are compensated for the quality, not quantity, of care delivered. It's measured using the alternative payment model framework, which defines different ways that providers are reimbursed for the care they provide and is used by a number of federal and state level organizations, including other Delaware state agencies, as a common language for defining different types of value-based care. This goal sets targets for the proportion of medical spend flowing through more advanced types of value-based payment models, which are dependent on several variables, including the readiness of the provider community to adopt these more advanced types of payment models, the medical carriers' inclusion of these types of payment models in their approaches to provider contracting, and plan participants actually using the providers who contract under these types of advanced payment models. Based on the measurement results of the FY23, the GHIP medical spend in that year for these advanced payment models was less than the target amounts that were set forth by the goal, so it was deemed that the goal was not met. The second goal.
Disappointing. We saw even earlier with Aetna pulling out of its agreement with Christiana Care that these kind of agreements are tough to keep and tougher to make effective. Commissioner Navarro, I don't know if you have anything to add to that, but obviously it's very disappointing that they're just not taking hold in Delaware.
And, it's for a variety of reasons. I mean, the provider community themselves have to take steps in order to qualify, and they're so overwhelmed with things like prior auth and other issues dealing with insurance companies. It's a real challenge. But to your point, the loss in the contract with Christiana Care and Aetna would have a profound impact on the results.
Yeah.
And just to further clarify that a bit more, it's around a particular type of value-based payment arrangement, not necessarily a network contract overall, just so that we were on the same page.
Thank you.
Okay. Moving on to this, sorry.
Yeah, moving on to the second one that we did not meet.
Yep. This is around offering and increasing engagement in tools that help plan participants use their healthcare benefits effectively. And that really starts with picking a health plan. The My Benefits Mentor tool is offered to active state employees, Delaware Transit Corporation employees, and state non-Medicare pensioners to help them compare the cost from an out-of-pocket perspective of the state's health plan options based on a member's historical, personalized claim data, and potential future needs. Use of this tool has been increasing over the past few years, and while we continue to see that trend play out in FY23, the utilization didn't increase by at least 5% over the prior year, as was specified in the target within this goal. So the goal was not met. But again, we continue to see additional utilization and really starting to kind of plateau around use of that tool. So good thing overall.
Maybe that was a stretch goal.
It may be worth revisiting or looking at the type of tool that's used to measure this goal in future years.
Okay.
The third goal is around limiting trend for plan participants with diabetes. The goal specifies a reduction in diabetic trend below an 8% threshold, and based on measurement, a 5% trend for members with diabetes in FY23 was observed, and so this goal was met.
That's significant.
Yeah. And I will point out that this is in some of the earlier stages of when we were starting to see GLP-1 drug utilization really take off. And we know that that drug is for both, well, let me say that differently. We know that GLP-1 drugs are available for members who have diabetes and separately for members who are seeking support with weight loss. So, you know, we know that a portion of FY23 saw some of that impact on GLP-1s for diabetes. But again, you know, despite some of that impact, we were able to see this goal be met. And then finally, the last goal is around limiting healthcare cost inflation through a targeted reduction in high cost, low value services and providers, calling out a few areas of spend such as inpatient and outpatient facility costs and pharmaceutical costs. And the progress towards this goal is measured against the Delaware DHSS healthcare spending benchmark. While overall GHIP trend has hovered just above 5% across multiple years compared to a national average of 6%, the GHIP trend is still above the DHSS healthcare spending benchmark of 3.1% for calendar year 2023. So the state group health plan fell short of this goal. So happy to take any questions or comments about these. I know I ran through that quickly, but if there are no questions, I'll hand it back over to the secretary.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Not all good news, but again, we have to track it even if it's bad news. All right, any other business? Our next meeting is Monday, June 24th. With that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. It's Josette.
Thank you, Secretary Manning. Second,
Seconds.
Sean, all in favor?
Aye.
See you in June. Thank you. Oh,